All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, Hillary Clinton, she got her coveted star turn at the DNC public access infomercial last night. Why did Democrats want to feature the person most proximately responsible for giving us all 4 years of Trump? Who knows? But here she is.
I wish Donald Trump knew how to be a president, because America needs a president right now. Throughout this time of crisis, Americans keep going, checking on neighbors, showing up to jobs as first responders, hospitals, grocery stores, nursing homes. Yes, it still takes a village. And we need leaders equal to this moment of sacrifice and service. We need Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
So there's an annoying argument that is starting to float around about why it is that seemingly Bernie supporters as a group are more likely to back Biden this time than they were willing to back Hillary last time. So here's senior Bernie hater Sydney Ember over at the New York Times writing on why this time around is different. She says, by most measures, it is this overwhelming desire to defeat Mr. Trump that helps explain why the Democratic Party does not expect Sanders loyalists to be as disruptive to the electoral prospects of the party's nominee as they were in 2016. Some detractors also see sexism in this more conciliatory approach, suggesting that his supporters harbored particularly visceral disdain for Mrs. Clinton because she was a woman. Now, everything about this construction is perfectly designed in a lab to make my blood boil. First of all, the framing that Sanders loyalists were, quote, disruptive to the electoral prospects of Hillary, as if voters are really just there to help fulfill the dreams and desires of politicians, like anyone owed Hillary a single thing. Perhaps what was disruptive to her electoral prospects was a terrible campaign, a non-existent message, not campaigning in Michigan, and, the public's rejection of decades of Clintonism. But this is all, in fairness, standard issue, mainstream media assumptions about how the Bernie bros are really to blame for Trump. It was that parenthetical that she threw in there that was the new twist. You gotta love how Sydney does this too. She, quote, says, some detractors also see sexism. Absolutely perfect example of how you use some theoretical group of people as a way to launder your own opinion as if it is actual reporting. In other words, Sydney Ember wanted to call Bernie supporters sexist for approximately the 1 millionth time, but she's supposedly a reporter, not an opinion columnist, so she can't just come out and say that. She's got to make up some imaginary detractors who are the ones seeing the sexism while positioning herself as just neutral purveyor of that opinion. But once something makes it into the pages of the New York Times, you can bet a million mindless, dead-eyed pundits are going to repeat it. And sure enough, I've seen the same theory floated on Twitter and in the convention coverage. So let's go ahead and deal with it before it fully takes root. First of all, is it even true that Bernie supporters are more readily backing Biden than they did Hillary? Now, the extent to which Bernie backers broke from the Democrats in 2016 has always been a bit exaggerated, and in fact, by historical standards, is no different than the drop-off of supporters of other losing primary candidates. So, somewhere around 12% of Sanders supporters ultimately voted for Trump, and another roughly 8% voted third party. That makes about 20% of defectors, which, by the way, is less than the 25% of Clinton backers who ultimately voted for John McCain back in 2008. Now, based on the polling, it does in fact look like somewhat fewer Bernie backers are likely to defect this time around. In the New York Times battleground analysis, they found about 12% of Bernie supporters who were looking to back Trump or looking to go third party. So what is actually going on here? Well, there's a pretty strong likelihood that some percent of Bernie's 2016 backers are just not Democrats anymore. Analysis at the time, back in 2016, found that a lot of the people who then voted for Trump in particular did not see themselves as Democrats. In fact, less than 50% of those who defected to Trump even leaned Democrat. Now, there are still plenty of people, especially in Appalachia, who are registered Democrats and absolutely despise national Democrats. But more and more of them are switching to the GOP every year, and Trump has certainly hastened and accelerated that shift. Second, the reality of Trump as president during a pandemic with unmitigated economic destruction, continued death and sickness, and continued stoking of chaos, including assaults on peaceful protesters, has certainly focused the mind of plenty Bernie supporter and not. It's a huge part of why Biden, by doing basically nothing, is significantly up in the polls. And it's a case that's been made by people like Cornel West, Noam Chomsky, and many other leftists. The last piece, though, is one I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I know you may be shocked, but I actually want to give Joe half a point here. Because it's not just that Trump is terrible and that some portion of the white working class Bernie supporters abandoned the Dem Party ship altogether between 2016 and 2020. On one metric, Joe actually is better than Hillary. Let me explain. So the worst part about the modern Democratic Party is their half-hearted palliative care for the poor and working class, their veneration of virtue signaling symbolism over any meaningful political change, their abdication of governance, their undying faith in the markets, and their blatant corruption. Let's put that aside. Another terrible and also electorally significant part of the modern Democratic Party is their contempt for most of America. They really believe that there is a class fit to govern and a class which is fit to be governed. The leaders of the party believe first and foremost in their own special brilliance and in a government by similarly class-situated and pedigreed experts. And they look down their nose at the masses, pity for the black and brown working class, contempt for the white working class. They're seen as useful only maybe for a colorful backdrop on a TV ad, but are never treated or viewed as full actualized human beings. This slips out in comments like Hillary's famous one about deplorables or Obama on clinging to guns and religion, or on the other side of the aisle, Mitt Romney and the 47%. Biden doesn't have that contempt. It's actually part of the reason that the Obama folks look down on him. According to a great piece in Politico, Obama world and Clinton world made Biden the object of their snooty contempt. They were both, Clinton and Obama, highly educated intellectuals. Biden was decidedly not. He was a mediocre student at University of Delaware. He was 76th out of 85 at Syracuse Law School. They saw him as practicing, quote, an old, outdated mode of politics. And it's why Biden's official nomination by an elevator operator who he met in a chance encounter may well end up being the best moment of the entire convention.
I take powerful people up on my elevator all the time. When they get off, they go to their important meetings. Me, I just head back to the lobby. But in the short time I spent with Joe Biden, I could tell he really saw me, that he actually cared, that my life meant something to him. And I knew, even when he went into his important meeting, he'd take my story in there with him. That's because Joe Biden has room in his heart for more than just himself. We've been through a lot, and we have tough days ahead. But nominating someone like that to be in the White House is a good place to start. That's why I nominate my friend, Joe Biden, as the next president of the United States.
Jacqueline felt seen and respected, and it meant something to her in that moment. Now, let's be clear. That lack of contempt has not translated into any good in terms of actually using his power for the good of the people. As Derica Purnell put it on Twitter, throughout Biden's career, he has boasted about his ability to bridge partisan divides, but it's been by sacrificing the needs of black people and poor people in the name of, quote, compromise. But when the bar has been set so incredibly low, where people literally just want to not be terrified, to have a leader with a normal human range of emotions, the fact that Joe departs from the recent Democratic tradition of complete contempt for most of America, it might be enough. On this one thing, Joe is actually better than Hillary, and he's actually better than Obama too. It's his superpower that has made it so hard for Trump to effectively hit him, and why it was so hard for Bernie's team to do the same. And by the way, it's not sexist to say so. You know, people talk about this likability factor, right. And a lot of times the way the media covers it is to even discuss that is sexist. But this is one of the things that I really saw that really hit home for me living in Kentucky, living in the industrial Midwest in Ohio, in one of these towns that's just been devastated, is for a lot of normal people, just the fact of the contempt that they get from the National Democratic Party was enough to move them away. Just the fact of seeing someone who doesn't view them personally with that level of contempt, it does actually make a difference electorally. Now, on the substance, it doesn't make any difference at all. Joe has long been, senator from MBNA, all of that stuff. He'll follow the Obama playbook. There's no doubt about that. But just on the electoral dynamics, this is part of why he's been so resilient.
This is why the sexism attack bothers me so much. And when we would talk about how Elizabeth Warren, appears to voters like a Harvard professor instead of as a working class person, they'd be like, oh, that's just sexism. Here's me a good example. I don't agree with her, but Cori Bush, who we've had on this show, she was an actual person from the streets, an activist who won the Democratic primary and beat Lacey Clay because people felt that she was not an elitist who spoke in the language that they did and who had comparable experiences. So what does that tell you? It wasn't about her gender. It was about the language that she used in order to connect with actual voters. And Obama and Clinton and her experience. Obama and Clinton, we all knew. Obama, they cling to their guns and their Bibles. That's who he was at his core. At the Columbia, the Harvard, that is what he was. For Hillary Clinton, her fake Arkansas accent while she was the first lady of Arkansas, we all knew it was fake. And we knew that she felt very comfortable as senator from New York City, senator from Goldman Sachs, senator from Bank of America. That is who she was always. And so you can tell with Biden, he is that on a policy level, but emotively, he doesn't project that. And that is his superpower. You're absolutely right.
And that is, I mean, we've been reading this reporting about how the Obama people had all this kind of
they hated
content. They looked down their nose, even at him. Think about that. The vice president of the United States. I know. And they felt like he didn't go to a fancy enough school for them. I mean, the guy that Obama chose to be by his side, and you're looking down at him in that way. I do think, look, most of this election revolves around Trump and his failures, and I think that will be the deciding factor. But part of why it's been so hard to hit Biden in a way that's effective and where it's landed and that's raised his negatives is because people view him as basically, a decent guy on a one-on-one basis who doesn't have contempt for them, and that matters a lot to the voters.
It certainly does.
Coming up on Rising, Democratic strategist Jennifer Holdsworth is going to share her thoughts on the Democratic convention so far when Rising continues.